Hello friends and welcome back to the channel where today I'm going to walk you through how I completed Path 5 of the Epoch of Pain quest using a team of Mutant and just Mutant champs. I don't have any Mystic champs on my team, but you feel free to bring Mystic champs if you need to. So quick disclaimer before we get started here, this is not going to be an exhaustive look at my entire path. I'm only going to show you one or maybe two runs at each fight. The goal here being just to give you an idea of how to play the fight and not give you like a complete upload of all 45, 50 minutes or whatever it is I spent on this path. The other thing I want to talk about quickly before we get into the CASSIE Lang fight is the global node, which I covered in the previous video, but just in case you haven't watched that, we'll cover it again here. The global node is called Fancy Footwork, and you see we have the gray power drain timer on us there on Deadpool. Whenever that timer expires, all of your power is removed automatically, and it is not subject to any sort of power drain immunity or resistance. It just happens. Now there are two ways that you can avoid this power drain from triggering. The first is by being in a special animation, and the second is by being in your dashback animation. Either of those things will prevent the power drain, and on this path in particular there are a few fights where you really do want access to your special attacks, so this isn't a global node where you can afford to ignore it. You really do kind of have to play into it for a couple of the fights. That being said, let's jump right into the CASSIE Lang fight, which is first here. Going in with Deadpool, you can really use anybody for this fight because there aren't really many options in the Mutant and Mystic class that hard counter this fight, except for maybe Professor X. So the general idea in this fight is that she's going to switch between two different modes. She has a mode where she has a 100% chance to evade all basic attacks, and then she switches into another mode where she has a 100% chance to miss all special attacks. And by parrying her, you can gain a passive effect that counters a mode that she is in. So you can parry and get a pursuit passive to counter the evade. If you parry again, you're going to get a vigilance passive to counter the miss. So you kind of have to balance your parries to make sure that you have the proper passive for whatever mode she's in. Now it is safe, of course, to basic attack into her while she has that miss passive, the untouchable passive rather. That's fine, but you really want to make sure that you have some way of countering her evade before you start basic comboing into her in the evade, because it's very annoying and she will counter you very quickly. The other thing to watch out for in this fight is the power sting, which is on a timer, and you can remove these power stings by reaching a multiple of 10 in your combo. So really, again, watch for the power sting and make sure that you're planning ahead for your special attacks. When you cross the threshold of 10 like I just did there, then you're safe to launch a special attack. The last node that you want to watch out for is a crush node. So if you dash back twice too quickly, you're going to get a crush debuff on you for a few seconds, and this is essentially going to make Cassie fully unblockable until that debuff is gone. And the problem, of course, there is you want to be parrying her in order to get access to those passive effects, the pursuit and the vigilance, and if she's unblockable, then you can't do that. So it's pretty short, and it's pretty easy to just kind of wait it out, so don't worry about that too much. Last thing I want to mention here is do your best to push Cassie to her special 2. You can do this by block baiting heavies. The special 1 places these combo detonation debuffs on you, and if you don't reach the actual combo before they expire, then you're going to take a whole bunch of burst damage and probably die. Special 2 has no effects like that, so much safer. Let's quickly cover some of the alternate options that I have listed here. In the Mystic class, pretty much anybody works. None of them really hard counter the nodes here. Sorcerer, Kushala, Wong, Deathless Guillotine, all really good damage dealers in the Mystic class. You're just going to have to play around the nodes like I talked about here. In the Mutant class, I would say Professor X is probably the best overall counter to this fight because he has the ability to counter both the evade and the miss. I personally do not like playing Professor X, so I didn't bring him on this path, but if you are a Professor X fan and are pretty good with him, definitely bring him for some of these fights. He's going to make your life a lot easier. Northstar also very good. He has access to slow. Onslaught can counter miss with his Neuroshocks, and I think Magneto can pretty much cheese this fight, but probably not too good for the rest of the fights on the path. But if you're struggling with this fight in particular, Magneto can turn off a lot of it just by existing in the fight. Alright, let's move on to the second fight in the quest. It is GWENPOOL, and similar to the previous path, you can really use anybody for this fight because it's almost entirely dependent on how you play rather than who you use. Now that being said, there is a bit of a bonus in the fight for prowess effects, and mutants have access to prowess typically, so any mutant with native access to prowess is probably going to have a little bit of a faster time here. Now, the main thing in this fight here is that you're going to do something like 90% less damage to Gwenpool unless it's with a special attack with a prowess effect active, and these can be passive or active prowess buffs. Now, for champions like Onslaught here who don't have native access to prowess, the game gives you a way of getting one, and that is by dexing the last hit of her special one. And Gwenpool has very easy specials to dex. The complexity here is the reverse control timer, which you can see is that first icon on me. So that timer continuously cycles between normal controls and reverse controls. There's no way to pause it, there's no way to turn it off. And that means that it can switch your controls mid-combo, mid-dex of her special one, which is very problematic. And if you take a hit from her special attack, there's going to be another timer that's placed on you, and you have something like 3 or 4 seconds to do a light combo ender, or you're going to be dead immediately. Like it'll just delete all of your health, so it's like instant death. Now, similar to the previous path, I like Onslaught for this fight because he has very lengthy special attacks. So if you time his special attacks when you're close to the end of the timer expiring, that's going to minimize the chances that the timer is going to swap on you mid-combo or mid-dex. The other thing you can do is hard hold block until the timer expires, and that'll give you kind of like a fresh start at the start of the next timer with which to dex or bait a special attack or combo into her. So managing the reverse controls and not getting caught by them in the middle of what you're doing is probably the most difficult part of this fight. Now, do remember the global node is at play here. So we have that power drain timer on us. It's going to trigger right there, as you can see. It's not as important in this fight because you will have such easy access to power. Every time she uses a special attack, she's going to give you a full bar of power. So you can afford to trigger that power drain a few times, and you're not really going to be penalized too much for it. Now, whenever you reach a bar of power, you can see that like pyramid timer on you, and you have something like 10 or 14 seconds to use a special attack, or else you're going to take like a burst of damage. But I don't think I had that problem at all in any of the runs against Gwenpool. It's really easy to use a special attack after you gain a bar of power, even factoring in some of the power drains that might be occurring here. Now again, mutants with access to prowess are going to have a much easier time. You still need to play into the nodes. You still want to be dexing or special attack and avoiding the reverse controls. However, if you have a champion who has native access to prowess, your specials are going to be hitting a lot harder, and thus her health is going to be going down a lot faster. You can see like Onslaught is fine for this fight, but he is a little bit slow, and I'm not really, trying too hard to play into like the, converting all of my neuroshocks into degens. I think I did it a few times here. If I had to do this fight again, I'd probably play it a little bit better, a little bit faster, but this was like my last or my second to last path, and I was more interested in getting it done than I was playing it well. So let's quickly cover alternate options. In the Mystic class, again, anyone really works. You have a way of getting prowess no matter what, so anybody with generic hard-hitting special attacks is going to be fine. In the Mutant class, Professor X is great. You might already have him on your team from the CASSIE fight. Toad is really, really good for this fight. A lot of prowess. Same with OG Storm, Danny Moonstar. But again, like I said earlier, any mutant with native access to prowess is going to be a little bit better in this fight. But again, any mutant champ is going to work just fine for you. So we're going to go ahead and launch the special one here. And you can see the degens are ticking for extra damage during the special attack. And down she goes. Alright, let's move on to the third fight on the path, which is Iron Fist. And this fight is what I would describe as like a very technical fight. So you cannot gain any buffs, so any champion who is reliant on buffs to do what they need to do is not going to work very well here. And in addition, you cannot place any debuffs on Iron Fist. So you're really dependent on your basic attacks and any sort of like passive damage over time effects, like Onslaught's Neuroshocks, for example here. So the main problem in this fight is a node called Pressure Gauge. You can see that little counter on us there. It goes from 0 to 10, and it increases by 1 for every basic attack hit that lands on Iron Fist, and it will decrease for every blocked hit you take and whenever you use a special attack. And if the counter ever goes to 10, you're going to take a huge burst of damage. If the counter ever reaches 0, you're going to lose all of your power. So you really need to manage blocked hits with the hits that you're landing on him so that you keep somewhere in that 2 to 8 or 1 to 9 range. You never really want to get close. The good news here is that you are rooted during his special attacks, and his special attacks have 3 hits. So it's really easy to kind of pick and choose which hits of the special you want to dex and which ones you want to allow to hit your block. And with Onslaught in particular here, being rooted during the end of his special 1 makes it really easy to heavy counter his special attacks, which means you can get the extended pause for his neuroshocks, which is really, really nice. Now with Onslaught, there are a couple of ways you can play this fight. I think in this version of the fight, I almost exclusively go for special 1s, and just because, you can stack the neuros up to 99, they do a lot of damage. You can go for the special 2 in this fight if you want to play around the fancy footwork node. It is going to make the fight a lot faster. His degen is passive, so it will work. But I, found it difficult to kind of work around the root and get to the special 2. So I figured the neuros were going to be a bit slower, but they were going to be just as effective here. Also in this fight, you have a root timer on you, and you can break out of the root with using a special attack, or you can just kind of stay still and dex his basic attacks or his special attacks. So again, the root here on both his special attack and the root timer kind of designed to help you a little bit. Now that being said, there is a small bit of like AI dependency here, because especially if you're sitting at 3 or 4 or 5 charges on that pressure gauge, and you're trying to bait out a heavy so that you can go in and combo him. He can hit into your block anywhere from 1 to 5 times, which can possibly lower your pressure gauge down to 0, and then you just lost all your power. So, try to avoid a situation where you need to be letting him hit your block a bunch of times, because you really want to manage that pressure gauge. That's like your #1 goal in this fight. Let's quickly talk through some of the other options that I have listed here. And again, these are mostly champions who have access to damage that isn't dependent on buffs or debuffs, or have some sort of passive damage over time effect. So in the Mystic class, Wong is really, really good for this fight. Wong is who I used for one of the objectives when this fight came out originally. You have plenty of time to get his blessings up, or his spells, or whatever they're called for him. And once you have 3 of the blue spells, he does a whole bunch of damage. And he can also regen a lot once you get the green spells up. So outside of Necropolis, this is a really good fight for you to kind of break out Wong in. So similarly, America Chavez, also very good for this fight. You can use her her passive dimensions to increase her attack rating, and those aren't buffs, so they will work. She also has a good amount of power gain, so you can use subsequent specials in order to reduce the pressure gauge timer. Really, really good for this fight in general. In the Mutant class, Negasonic is really good. All of her damaging effects and her stun, for that matter, are passive, so they will all land. Remember that he is not stun immune, he is debuff immune, so Negasonic's passive stun is going to work in this fight. Now, if you can get Negasonic's ideal rotation to work in this fight, where you go to the special 2, and then you refresh all the incinerates with a special 1, keep them paused with light combo enders, she can do a lot of damage very quickly in this fight. But again, I found it pretty difficult to properly manage your power in this fight and the pressure gauge node. Your experience might be different, of course. So let's talk about Danny Moonstar for a second. Danny Moonstar also has access to passive neuroshocks, I think on her special 1. She also has access to passive prowess. The prowess buffs that she gains won't work. And she also has that interesting mechanic where if she tries to take a blocked hit with an illusion up, the opponent is going to miss. So that could help you manage the pressure gauge timer, or counter rather, a little bit better. I haven't seen anybody use Danny though, so kind of consider that one maybe unproven until somebody shows you how to do it. Another option is probably Nightcrawler. I think all of his prowess effects are passive as well. His instant bleeds, I'm not sure if his instant bleeds will work for this fight. I think they probably should, because they're not debuffs. But again, a little bit unproven. And then another option I don't have listed here, I think, is Dazzler. I think Outline from 4Loki ended up using Dazzler for this fight and had some success with her, so you might as well. But again, I really like Onslaught for this fight, or Negasonic if you have her. And this is a pretty lengthy fight here, just trying to survive long enough for the neuroshocks to tick him down, and on we go. Alright, next up we have a Toad fight, and I want to start off by saying this is not the original recording of my run through this path. I somehow lost my footage of this fight, and the only thing that I was left with was a 45 or 60 second clip of Deadpool doing the last 5%. So I actually went in earlier tonight and I boosted up and revived through the path to record like a good run against Toad. So you know, the things I do for you know, making these guys worthwhile. So the Toad fight, he's going to alternate his special attacks between rooting you during them and then reversing your controls during them. And you can tell what the difference is by the icon there. The little red hand is the root, and then the head is the reverse controls. Now in this fight, you really want to try and intercept him as much as possible. That's going to invalidate his prowess. The more prowess effects he has, obviously the more dangerous his specials are, but it's also going to increase the potency of his poisons on you. And you can dash back every so often to purify a poison on you, but they are going to add up over time, so you really want to intercept in this fight as much as you can. Now, a couple tips that I would give you for managing reverse controls on the special one. What I've been doing is kind of keeping my eye on his side of the screen whenever I know that I'm baiting a special attack, because the purple unblockable text will appear at the very start of his special animation, and that gives you like a couple frames of warning to like make the connection between your eyes and your hands, and for you to, you know, dash forward, which would also be a dex back. Also, you want to keep him as far away from his wall as possible, because when you strike Toad against the wall, he's going to activate that paralytic secretion that's going to give him extra chance to poison, and it's also going to give him regen. And you really don't want him gaining, you know, 2 or 3 of those regen passes, because you aren't going to be able to outdamage him if you keep him up against the wall here. Now with Onslaught in particular, he is a fine counter. There is a little bit of RNG to using Onslaught in this fight, and that's because on his special attacks, he applies those organic magnetism debuffs, and if you cause one of Toad's regen buffs to fail, or regen passives to fail, via those organic magnetism passives, you're going to be taking chunks of burst damage. You can see, you might have noticed already that I've taken 1 or 2 of those already in this fight. So, you know, it's luck of the draw. That's another reason why you want to keep Toad away from the wall, because if you special into him against the wall, you're almost certainly going to cause one of those passives to fail, and then you're just going to fall over and die here. Rooted specials with Toad makes it really easy, again, similar to the Iron Fist fight, to heavy counter and get the extended pause on your effects. A couple seconds ago, I got like a really nice chunk of passive degens and was able to keep them paused for a while. That's kind of what you want to go for here. I found it much easier in this fight than the previous ones to kind of play around the fancy footwork node, because there really isn't any urgency to do anything in this fight. You can always back up and parry or continuously dash back to create space, and especially when that timer is about to go off to save your power. Let's talk through some of the alternate options here. Deathless Guillotine, Kushala, and Juggernaut can all do this fight, and again, if you're just playing around the nodes here, pretty much anybody with decent damage can work. You're going to have to watch about the poisons, but again, if you're intercepting him a lot, that's going to keep the potency of those poisons low. In the Mutant class, Sinister is really good for this fight. If you get the poisons on you, you can special attack to send them back to Toad as degens. He's also immune to reverse controls. There's no penalty for being immune to reverse controls in this fight, so all you have to do is just manage the rooted special one, which is pretty easy. Negasonic, if she's already on your team, again, pretty good for this fight. Professor X, if you have him, also can put in some really good work here as well, and he's immune to reverse controls, similar to Sinister. Alright, moving on to the second to last fight against Heimdall. Again, you can really use anybody for this fight, but champions who have access to a lot of very quick, very large burst damage are really going to excel here, and that's one reason why I really like Deadpool for this fight. And I realize that Deadpool is a champion who everybody might not have because he was only available during the Banquet event last December, but if you have him, even like an Ascended 6-star is going to put in a lot of work here. So the deal with this fight is that Heimdall is going to be unstoppable, and he's going to root you during his heavy attacks, but you need to hit him with a light attack during his heavy attack, and that's going to turn off that blue unstoppable passive, which is a brace passive. So while that brace passive is blue, he cannot be knocked down by heavies or special attacks. You need to hit him during his heavy attack in order to put that brace passive on cooldown. So once you do that, you also notice here that we're doing like essentially no damage. All of the damage that you do in this fight is being stored in that purple battery icon. and then whenever you knock Heimdall down, the damage is reflected to him at like 200% potency. So if you have a champion like Deadpool who does a ton of burst damage on his special 2 into his special 1 cycle, you're dealing a lot of damage at one time, kind of like I just did there. Now, if you are knocked down by Heimdall, all of that damage in the battery is sent back to you, and it's very easy to get knocked down in this fight like I just did there, if he does a heavy and you're not prepared for it. The AI in this fight is really wonky. Sometimes he'll do 2 heavies in a row. Sometimes if you're trying to sidestep into a special attack, he will go ahead and heavy into it, making him unstoppable during your special, and then he'll punish you right afterwards. So you really have to focus on what he's doing. Be very, very careful with the sidesteps in this fight. And also, his auto block is also annoying. Sometimes his auto block can trigger like during the heavy attack. If that happens, he'll just sit there and hold block, and he won't do anything until you tap his block. Just like that. So, yeah, that was fortuitous that it happened just as I was explaining it. So he will sit there and do nothing for the whole fight unless you hit his block. So he kind of just like freezes up. Now let's talk through some of the other options here. And again, any like high damage champ is really going to work well here. Kushala is really good. Shothra I've seen do well in this fight. Sorcerer has access to the slow debuff, so she can kind of turn off the unstoppable. Deathless Guillotine has a lot of degen damage that you can store up in that battery and then unleash it with a knockdown. In the Mutant class, again, Megasonic might already be on your team for some of the other fights we've talked about. Northstar as well. Onslaught also can do well in this fight. Alright, moving on to the last fight on this path, which is Prowler. Prowler is a very interesting fight with a whole bunch of mutants. You're working at class disadvantage, which kind of sucks. I really struggled with this fight on this path with mutants. Now, I think Onslaught is my best option here because with the Neuroshocks up, you cannot miss, and thus it's easy for you to punish all of Prowler's special attacks. You can punish them with a heavy in order to get the extended pause on your Neuroshocks. But the power drain in this fight, not only from the Fancy Footwork node, you also have the power drain from Plagued Mind, and you also have the power drain from using a special attack. So you're taking a lot of like unavoidable damage in this fight, and I found it very, very difficult to manage Onslaught special attacks and also kind of play around the nodes. In addition, you have to use alternating specials in this fight, because if you don't, then he gains an indestructible passive, and the only way to remove it is by using the correct special. So, it's difficult to manage your power in this fight, but you have to do it, because if you don't, you're going to be doing no damage here. So you can see I'm kind of struggling to get to my special 2. I did get some degens to convert from Neuroshocks, but again, it's kind of like luck of the draw. You can have like a really good run where he's playing into you and doing exactly what you need. I didn't have any runs like that on this fight. I think I used maybe a handful of revives on Prowler. I really struggled with him, like I said a moment ago. Other things you need to watch out for this fight. If you don't have a Neuroshock on him, you need to remember not to try and punish his special attacks, because that will trigger the falter on you, and then you're going to be in trouble. So when I was looking for alternate options for this fight in the Mystic class, I was looking at champions who can somehow gain power other than by hitting into Prowler. So Wong especially, I think, could do really well in this fight, because when you hold his heavy attack with enough Eldritch energy, you can like zoom up to 2 bars of power easily, and that's really going to help you play around the node where you have to alternate specials. That being said, if you don't stop your power gain like right over a bar or 2 bars of power, you're going to be subject to the unavoidable damage when Prowler drains you after you use your special attack. So, risk reward there when it comes to Wong. So similarly to him, Sorcerer and Purgatory also have passive power gains. Their combat power rate is reduced though, so again, it might be a hit or miss with them, and neither of them really counter miss, so you kind of have to play around that as well. In the Mutant class, Professor X, really good for this. He also counters miss and can do a lot of damage quite quickly. The problem with Professor X is that you really want to be spamming the same special with him, and alternating specials is not really conducive to him. So again, your mileage may vary a bit when it comes to him. North Star, I think, would be really good. I think BMcG probably used North Star for this fight. He has like built-in power efficiency, but again, the power drain from Prowler kind of nixes that, so your mileage may vary with him as well. So that's pretty much going to do it for the Path 5 guide. I sincerely hope it was helpful to you. This is one of the more difficult paths for me for sure. Let me know in the comments below if you found this path as difficult as I did. Make sure to hit like. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so that you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.